Welcome, everyone, to the Inclusion Podcast. I'm Dr. Julie Costin.
And I'm Dr. Christy Preddy-Franzak. We're so glad you're here as we explore all things inclusion.
So whether you're a school leader, an educator, a parent, or simply passionate about inclusion, this podcast is for you.
In each episode, we go beyond the usual conversations, diving into what truly makes inclusive education work.
Together, let's make a difference, one conversation at a time. Here we go. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Inclusion Podcast. This is episode 66, and it's about when opposites co-teach, and Christy and I are going to be sharing lessons from teaching together.
I think at the time that this episode is likely to air, Julie, if you can believe it, we will have been co-teaching for 6 years.
And we co-teach every day in multiple places, in multiple states, all virtually, all the time.
Yeah.
And so if you kind of think about that, it's a pretty complex task to co-teach when I live in New York, Christy lives in Ohio, and we might be co-teaching on a single day in California, Alaska, and Arizona.
Yeah, for sure. And, when Julie first introduced the episode, we are using ourselves because we are quite opposite from each other, but complementary at the same time. And if you're like, oh, my co-teacher and I aren't opposites, this episode is still for you. We probably, Julie, I hadn't planned it, but we should probably explain what we mean by co-teachers. You started to allude to it because we are not physically in the same space, but the download for this episode is like a ton of strategy. So a couple quick things. Julie and Paula Kluth wrote a book about 30 days to the co-taught classroom, and they had several fun ways to get to know your co-teacher. So Julie and I took that premise or that idea, and we made 101 ways to really get to know your co-teacher better. And that can be at the start of a relationship. That can be 6 years into a relationship. That could be, your 20th year of working together. How do you maintain a really deep and strong relationship? And so you can get that download at inclusiveschooling.com/download 66. We like to talk about our opposites because we feel like that's our strength. But let's just talk a little bit about co-teachers, Joel, and then we can dive in.
Yeah, so when we say co-teaching, we mean anytime two adults are responsible for the education of a group of students at the same time. And so as you can tell, our co-teaching probably looks very different than yours, meaning yours is probably not virtual, yours is probably in real life. But it doesn't matter if you're an 8th grade special ed teacher and you happen to be in 7 different classrooms a day, those are all co-teaching relationships. And if you're an elementary teacher and you spend half the day in a 3rd grade classroom and the rest of your day in a 4th and 5th grade classroom, those are still co-teaching relationships. It doesn't mean it has to be all day, every day. It just means anytime 2 adult humans are responsible for the care and education of students in front of them.
And Julie, even though we use the word teacher, so you've kind of described the doesn't mean how long, it doesn't matter where you are or whatever, like all day, part of the day. But we use the word teacher, and then that confuses people because we say you could be in a preschool classroom and you have a teacher and a teaching assistant and they're co-teaching. Or you could be in a high school and it's choir and speech and language therapist consults with the choir teacher, and that's co-teaching. So even though we talk about the word teacher, we don't mean you have to be a licensed teacher to be co-teaching. Okay.
Yeah, no, that's really important. So now you might be going, okay, yeah, I guess I am a co-teacher for some or part or all of my day. And if that's how you're feeling, we want to talk about this. If that's how you identify, I guess, as a co-teacher in some way, we want to talk about what it's like when opposites co-teach and how to leverage essentially the things that you're different at in order to make your teaching even more effective.
And so, Julie, I thought it'd be fun because I don't know the answer to this and I had to really think about it. So it might be, but you're quick. You'll get it fast. When do you think you first noticed how different we were?
Our first conversation, probably about 30 seconds in. Yeah, for sure. I was like, whoa, this person is very different from me in every way. So the first conversation we had was over the phone, and it was you were talking to me about a poem, if you recall. And I could tell I asked you a question about leaving the university, and your response was very different than what I would have expected or the response that I would have said.
Interesting. Cause I was thinking, I recognize that like you challenged me or like I wasn't like you. This is different. I was different from you, but I didn't think of us as different, meaning like you were really willing to be silly and I was petrified by being silly. But
Yes.
I didn't really acknowledge that like as we're different. It's just like, wow, I can't be that free. And it wasn't until we took Time Genius that I
Oh,
think I know. Like how many
what?
years ago was that into our relationship? But
Oh.
that's when I really understood how deeply we saw the world differently.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Yeah, and so Time Genius, just in case you're curious, was a Marie Forleo class that we took that we really examined how we think about and use time. And I think that did make things a lot more clear for sure. But yeah, I saw us as different from the jump.
I think that the next thing I wanted to talk a little bit is like, how do you find harmony? And, we say, and I do believe wholeheartedly that
Mm,
we are better together and
mhm,
that we build upon each other's strengths. But I also wouldn't say that's seamless or without bumps or pain, right?
mhm,
But I don't want to trigger the negative emotional tractor, but I do want to recognize that relationships are a challenge.
mm.
So, and then you can maybe pick some that are a little bit more positive, but like, how do our differences make our work harder, but also better? Or like,
Mm,
what habits have we generated that because we're opposites, our business is better?
mhm.
Or like, what does compromise look like? Like any of that.
Yeah, so in case you don't know us well, our differences can be described in the fact that Christy loves a good spreadsheet to sort of make sense of something. And I would prefer some sort of creative vision board with multicolors and lines between
Stickers.
things and stickers and probably some washi tape to make that same point. And so I'm a very visual person. I'm a very big thinker. Christy really, really likes the detail and gets excited about managing the smaller pieces. I can't even explain it because it doesn't sound fun to me, but managing the smaller pieces and parts of our business. So you asked kind of how do those go together, and I would say they make lots of things bumpier. They make lots of things bumpier. So let's say we're gonna create something brand new. We've learned over time that we can't start with a brand new creation plan, just the 2 of us and a piece of paper, because we're gonna argue for a long time about how to start and what starting means and what the finished product means and how it might look for you versus for me. And usually by the end, I'm pretty confused and shut down, and you're pretty angry, and we're over it, and we move on to some other task. And so bumps happen all the time because we approach things differently. But I think over the 6 years, we've learned to go, ooh, okay, this isn't similar for us. So how do we proceed? And how do we do this in a way that usually means the big idea is pretty amazing and all the details are in place because of our work together. It's kind of a simple way to say it.
Yeah, exactly. It's like we're two halves of a whole, but sometimes those halves just don't like line up with each other perfectly.
Mhm.
We really have to work at it. And I think that seeing how effective we are on the other side keeps us both motivated to go through the bumps.
Mhm.
I think it also helps us recognize, or at least I'll speak for myself, I feel like I've become more in tune with my own nervous system. It's
Mhm.
almost like you're a mirror for me.
Mhm.
Like I can see things more clearly about how I'm perceived and why I do the things I do because they're helping my nervous system. But that has given me greater appreciation for how I'm perceived by others or how calming my nervous system didn't help others.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, so we know that teaching is a creative process and it involves all kinds of different ways that you have to negotiate things from prepping to teaching to assessment, all the
To
aspects.
dealing with a behavior that's a problem in the classroom.
That's right. So all
Right.
those on the fly moments, all those planning moments, all the pieces and parts that go into this very complex thing that we'll call teaching. And so a lot of people struggle when they're different because of the differences. And so I just want to take a really concrete thing and ask you, Christy. A lot of people get worried or think a lot about who leads, who
Mm.
follows, when do we hand over the mic? When is it your turn? When is it my turn? And the very real feelings that come with those decisions.
It's funny you asked that one, Julie, because I was thinking about parody this morning because I had not ever used that word until I met you and we started talking about co-teaching.
Mhm.
So there's a couple things I'm thinking. One, I believe I've had to learn, how do you say, like, it's not personal. Let's say I think you're hogging the mic.
Okay. Seems likely.
But what I've actually learned is oftentimes when you do things that I think are like, oh, you must think you're smarter than me, or you think you have something better to say than me, it's twofold. One, it's my own insecurities about myself that you're probably not thinking. How many times have you said, Christy, you know what I'm really thinking about you right now? How many times have I had to write a letter to myself to say, what is Julie really thinking about me? Which is
Yeah.
always positive, supportive, encouraging, always, right?
Right.
And so, like, I had to learn that it was my own projection or my own insecurities that were taking it personally. And then I think well into our lives together, I realized that I understood your insecurities. And so sometimes things that you did were your coping strategies. They were things that you needed to do to bring yourself to feel in homeostasis. And I could respect that because it didn't feel like you were hogging. Like I was like, oh, she needs to know what's coming next, or she is feeling anxious right now. So doing this thing sort of soothes her nervous system. So when I think about parity, which is, sorry, your question, for me, it wasn't about even the distribution of work or the distribution of decision making, which I think is important, but it was understanding why I felt there was a lack of parity or why in some instances someone did something that didn't seem like it was valuing our parity. Does that make sense? I don't know how to say that more succinctly.
No, I think it's just you're really just sort of underscoring that there's so much beneath the surface when you look at parody. And it can be about ego-driven kind of things. It can be about deeper feelings. It can be about worries, etc. And I think both of us have learned that it's not personal. It's actually just how do we get this content out in the very best way that we can in the moment with the planning that we've done, right? So it's like sometimes we really, really plan how we're going to kind of share the microphone and share the big ideas. Now, many of you are co-teaching in a special ed, general ed. It's a very common pairing. And when I was co-teaching as a special ed teacher, I think it was really challenging because I had a lot to say, but I wasn't the content expert. And so it became this very tricky balance of how do we talk about the fact that you might be the chemistry teacher and I'm the special ed teacher, but I still want to have parity in this room. And I still want to co-teach in a way that makes sense for both of us. And so I think it's about hard conversations. I think it's about saying, gosh, I felt really like I took over a story that Christy did one time. And so I was having a blast and I was trying on hats and doing all sorts of things, right? And I didn't know that it felt like I took over the story because I thought this was funny and I was having a good time. But later when she said that, it's like, oh, let me reflect on that. Ooh, I could see how it felt that way. But without you saying it, I wouldn't have known that's how you felt. And so some of this is just the hard conversations to say, here's what I can bring to this, and here's how that felt to me. And those things we're not used to doing as educators. It's not comfortable to say the hard truth.
Well, and it has to be a safe place. So I'm going to say two things about that instance. Because as soon as Julie said it, I was back on the stage in Australia and you had a cowboy hat on.
Yeah.
And
it was hilarious.
it was hilarious. And so one thing I wanted to say about it was I wish in the moment I could have returned to homeostasis and seen that you were providing a really important access point for the learners. I wish I could have seen that in the moment. And I think if I can, and I think I work at this, anytime I start to feel, the hackles or the insecurity or whichever emotion it is, if I go, is this helping some other learner in here? Is this about them and not me? And if I see our co-teaching strength, first and foremost, that we can provide and support more nervous systems because we have the two of us, it instantly is fine. But I'm not always able to do that.
In the
But
moment.
yeah, sorry.
Oh, I just said you're not always able to do that in the moment.
In the moment, because my lid's flipped and, all the things. But I also believe that it has taken, and I'm so grateful that we've been making it this long because Julie is a safe harbor. So in our work, whether it's in Behavior 360 or just any training we do, we end up talking about safe, seen, soothed, and secure. And that I could bring that up with Julie. I don't think in the early years I would have.
No, for
And
sure.
I would have stuffed it or been snarky about it or resentful. But because over time our relationship became so safe, I could bring it up.
So, Christy, I'm listening to the brains of listeners who are going, that's right. It takes time to build trust with a co-teacher. So why do I keep getting moved from second grade to fourth grade to sixth grade to eighth grade to da-da-da-da? And the truth is we wish we could solve that for you, but we can't because sometimes you're needed in multiple ways in different times in different places. And it is true. The more time you have with someone, the more you're able to talk through the challenges that exist. And all I would say to you who are new co-teacher partner every single year or few months is that you have to get good at having hard conversations more quickly. You have to sort of accelerate your learning and accelerate this trust, which reminds me of the handout that we have
Yeah,
for you all.
let's talk about that because I was thinking, well, maybe we could just start with easier things or at least things that help us understand each other so that when we do have a hard conversation, it isn't so rough.
Yeah, and that is to say, let's build trust between each other, whether we've been together
Yeah.
20 minutes or 20 years. So what we have for you is 101 ways to get to know your co-teacher. And it, like Christy said, was based off of the 30 Days to the Co-Taught Classrooms. That's a book that we have that has lots of really useful pieces to it, but we took it and expanded it. So whether you're just getting to know your co-teacher, you might be asking questions like, why did you become a teacher? What is your favorite lesson of the year? What is your worst habit? What is your best joke? What do you like most about the first day of school? Those are the kinds of things you might talk about. But let's talk about when you've been together for a while, Christy. What examples do we have for how to keep the relationship strong?
Yeah, things like what's something I can do to help you feel more supported? Even like, how do you prefer to handle conflicts or misunderstanding? Just knowing that and talking about it before it happens. What are your non-negotiables in a great classroom? Like, could you imagine, Julie, if we would have had those words when we were first co-teaching? And this could be, again, a para and a educator having these conversations so that we understand some of those things that we think everybody just knows.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think just all of these questions will get you closer. And I think how people have used these questions varies greatly, team to team. But some people have cut up these questions and they use them to kick off every single new meeting that they have. Some people just will glance over them and pick a question that they really like that day. Some people will spend a good amount of time, say at the beginning of the year or the middle of the year, reconnecting and re-establishing that relationship and talking about the harder things that are challenging you at the time through the use of this particular resource.
And then we even have some for those of you who are kind of veterans at doing this. And like one of my favorite ones is what's one risk you want to take in the classroom this year? Like we're upping our ante in our education and our skills. And so what's something that I could do to support that kind of you taking that risk? Or What are your favorite ways to celebrate your own growth? That could just be an interesting conversation because if you're like Julie and me, it'd be like, oh, I don't celebrate. And Julie'd be like, I celebrate that I woke up and had coffee and got here today. And I'm like, that's way too much celebration. That's just required of being human, right?
Mhm.
So we get to understand how we perceive even celebrations.
Yeah, so use this in its intended way. So if a question annoys you, doesn't work for you, then skip it. But use it in ways that will bring you closer and closer to your co-teacher, because some of this work that you do that helps you to learn how you're similar, how you're opposite, and how you work on a day-to-day basis is going to make your co-teaching relationship even stronger.
And so be sure to get the download at inclusiveschooling.com/download 66. And I do like this idea, Julie, that if you kind of laughed or nodded your head, or you're even kind of rethinking whether or not you are opposites, then make sure you share this with your co-teacher and make a plan together about how you want to move forward with strengthening your relationship.
Thank you for tuning in, and don't forget to subscribe and catch up on past episodes where we share valuable insights, straight talk, and practical steps to challenge outdated special education practices. You can find every episode with the show notes at inclusiveschooling.com/inclusion-podcast to build more inclusive schools together.